Can a single rifle cartridge ignite a rebellion? In 1857, a decision by the British East India Company turned its own soldiers into enemies and pushed an empire to the brink of collapse. This is how arrogance sparked a war no one was prepared for. In 1857, the British Empire believed India was firmly under its control. The East India Company had ruled vast territories for over a century. Its private army, made up of over 200,000 Indian soldiers known as sepoys, seemed loyal. The empire looked stable, profitable, untouchable. But beneath the surface, a storm was gathering. This was a corporation with its own flag, its own tax system, and its own laws. For years, the company had been aggressively expanding through a policy known as the Doctrine of Lapse. The British simply annexed Indian kingdoms if a ruler died without a direct male heir. Local princes were stripped of their power. Ancient royal families were humiliated. Taxes increased to levels that broke the backs of the peasantry. Traditional industries collapsed under British economic policies, as Indian artisans were ruined by a flood of imported British goods. To the British, these were improvements and modernization. To many Indians, they were calculated attacks on their identity and their livelihood. But the final spark would come from something much smaller, a new rifle. The company introduced the pattern 1853 Enfield rifle to its Indian troops. To load it, soldiers had to bite open a greased paper cartridge. Soon, a rumor spread like wildfire through the barracks. The grease was made from cow fat and pig lard. For Hindu soldiers, the cow was sacred. For Muslim soldiers, the pig was an abomination. Whether the rumor was fully true or not didn't matter. To the sepoys, this wasn't just a military task. It was a forced violation of their faith and a direct attack on their souls. To the British officers, it seemed like a minor technical issue. They dismissed the soldiers' concerns as superstition. This was the fatal decision. Instead of listening, they chose the path of stubbornness and arrogance. The first sign of the coming explosion happened in Barakpur. A soldier named Mangal Pandey, driven by desperation and faith, attacked his officers. He was executed, but he became an overnight martyr. His name became a rallying cry that echoed across the subcontinent. The tension finally snapped on May 10, 1857, in the town of Meerut. When 85 soldiers refused to use the cartridges, the British decided to make an example of them. In a brutal public ceremony, the men were stripped of their uniforms and shackled in heavy iron chains. They were sentenced to 10 years of hard labor in front of their horrified comrades. The British thought they were restoring order. In reality, they were lighting the fuse. That night, the remaining sepoys revolted. They broke open the jail, freed their comrades, and killed their British officers. The rebels didn't flee. They marched 40 miles through the night toward Delhi, the ancient seat of power. They entered the Red Fort and declared the aging Mughal Emperor Bahadur Shah II as their leader. Suddenly, a mutiny had become a national war for independence. The rebellion spread rapidly across northern and central India to Kanpur, Lucknow, and Jhansi. But this was not a unified revolution. Some fought for religion, others for lost kingdoms, and many for simple revenge. There was no single command, no coordinated strategy. The British response was ruthless. Reinforcements were rushed in, cities were bombarded, and villages suspected of supporting rebels were burned to the ground. In Kanpur, the conflict reached its darkest point. After a massacre of British civilians, the retaliation was horrific. Suspected rebels were executed without trial. In a deliberate display of terror, some were tied to the mouths of cannons and blown apart. The war was no longer about territory. It was fueled by pure, unfiltered hatred on both sides. By 1858, the rebellion was effectively crushed. The cost was enormous. Tens of thousands had died, and entire regions were devastated. But while the rebellion failed militarily, it changed the world forever. The British government realized the East India Company had fundamentally mismanaged the jewel of the empire. The company, which had conquered a nation through trade and greed, was officially dissolved. Rule over India was transferred directly to the British crown. The real fatal decision wasn't just the greased cartridge. It was the arrogance that came before it. the belief that a foreign corporation could rule millions of people indefinitely without understanding or respecting them. The Indian Rebellion of 1857 proved that control built on fear and economic dominance can look stable until it suddenly isn't. A single cartridge didn't bring down the empire, but the arrogance behind it almost did. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history's darkest strategic failures, make sure to subscribe to History's Fatal Decisions. We have more stories of empires, errors, commercial disasters, and the human cost of bad leadership coming soon.